Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth."
Now we're looking at Genesis chapter 28. We sort of continue a bit of the Jacob versus Esau battle, and we're looking now today at what we might call a glimpse of Heaven's Gate as we continue with this patriarch Jacob. Genesis 28, looking really at verses 10 through 17, and right in the middle there, Jacob's words. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." Beersheba, that's where he'd come from, mentioned in verse 10. Beersheba hadn't perhaps been all that much of a place, but at least it had some of the marks of civilization, not least a deep well that Jacob's grandfather Abraham had dug himself, so we're told in Genesis 21:30. You could visit the ruins of Beersheba today. You could see the storehouses there and the residences, and you could see the main street and the well, now about 3,500 years old. It's still there, and it's still got water in it. No, Beersheba wasn't too bad, but now 70 miles or so to the north, Jacob, the reluctant hero of our story, is at, or rather near, a little nothing of a city called Luz, L-U-Z. It's a crisis moment for Jacob because he's on the run from his twin brother Esau. The sun is setting over the Mediterranean there in the west, and the citizens of Luz are about to close the city gates for the evening. But Jacob, the fugitive, decides not to stay the night in Luz. Perhaps it's too risky. Perhaps he'd be betrayed to his brother Esau. So it's going to be his first night out ever in the open air, and he probably hadn't even got a tent. Or if he had got a tent, it's unlikely he'd have known to put it up because Jacob was that kind of person. Yeah. Jacob was an indoor cat. He was built for the home life. He was a sort of pipe and slippers character, really a bit of a mama's boy. And certainly his mother, Rebecca, doted on him much more than Esau. Excuse me. It's a bit sticky, this family. Esau, you see, every time Esau came into the house, he left a trail about a mile wide and arrows left all over the hallway, carcasses from his latest shooting trips hanging from the banisters or soaking quietly in the bathtub. It was a pain having Esau around as far as Rebecca was concerned. But Esau, well, he was awful. He would fill up the house with his loud, hairy presence. But Jacob was, in Mrs. Isaac's opinion, a superlative example of successful male domestication. The Isaacs were a strange family. It does sometimes happen that greatness skips a generation. This was the case now. Everyone had heard of Abraham, of course, that giant patriarch of the Bible and of the faith. We've been mentioning his obedient willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac, upon whom rested all the hopes for God's covenant purposes for the human race. And so Isaac, well, he must be counted as one of the patriarchs. And yet he doesn't come across quite convincingly as a patriarch. The prominence seems to have leapfrogged over Isaac and landed instead on his own son Jacob. And then as we look at Jacob, keeping clear of Luz itself that night for fear of betrayal, we can't for the life of us see where the greatness in Jacob lay. Here's the man who's going to be head of the 12 tribes of Israel. He's going to be famous. How was it that God ever fast-tracked him for that position in the first place? Again, a mama's boy, a stay-at-home, a sly little cheat, egged on by Rebecca, his mother. He'd first of all persuaded Esau, his older twin brother, in one mad, hungry moment to trade in his rightful family birthright, doubling the share of his estate, for a TV dinner, and that's what has happened. And later, when the time came for Isaac to bestow his dying blessing on Esau, or at least he thought it was dying, we mentioned that actually he lasted for another 40 years. But at that moment, Rebecca overheard the plans for the blessing and dressed Jacob up as Esau. And remember, he goes in there with all these funny things on his neck and his arms. In 1955, the Platters wrote a song about him. Oh yes, I am the great pretender. I seem to be what I'm not, you see. Then they had a little rehearsal with him until he could impersonate Esau's voice, as well as Frank Caliendo. That was the celebrity impersonator of my generation. Maybe Rich Little would be more appropriate for some of you. They had a little rehearsal, and then they would usher Jacob into Isaac's presence, holding an appropriate casserole in his hands, and in a 10-minute coup, Esau's birthright had gone down the drain. It was out of this plot, it was out of this kitchen intrigue, that the God of all the universe, your God and mine, was to further his covenant agreement and bless the human race, to establish the family of faith that has as its result the Christian worldwide family today. Well, no wonder Jacob is cautious that night near Luz. He's running for his life. He's afraid. On an earlier night, while escaping, he'd been under cover, verse 5 of Genesis 28 tells us that, at his uncle Laban's house. But now he's out under the stars, there in the wilderness, with a stone for his pillow. Now, Esau could have done that no problem without batting an eyelid, because Esau was a very earthly character who would think nothing about mixing in a brace of pheasants with his breakfast cereal. Not so with Jacob. It's remarkable that Jacob was even able to sleep at all that night. But sleep he did, because we learn here in Genesis 28, verse 12, that God communicated with Jacob, seemingly for the first time in his life, through the dream and the vision of the ladder, or more accurately, perhaps the staircase, leading from earth to heaven with its angelic messengers spanning its entire length. The remarkable thing is that there's no stern lecture here from God, no recrimination, no get back to your father or anything like that. Jacob isn't even returning as a chastened and reformed prodigal. It's while he's out in the wilderness alone, with family and friends far, far away, that he realizes that God is very near, that God is not left far behind. God is right there with him in the wilderness. Not only that, but God is blessing him. It's there in verse 13, and it's a remarkable reaffirmation of the great covenant blessing pronounced on Abraham much earlier. It's a blessing of universal application, as verse 14 shows us. And your descendants, it says, will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. That's God speaking to Jacob the grifter, Jacob the hustler. And we and the Christian family here in the comfort and prosperity of America are part of that worldwide blessing and covenant today, 3,500 years later. If there was a conversion point in Jacob's life, then it was at this place Luz, which came, verse 19, to be called instead Bethel, which means the house of God, because when Jacob woke up, verse 16, that was the overwhelming impression he had. God was in this place and he didn't know it. It was a place of awe, more awesome than any church or cathedral. And when he woke up, he said, "This is the gate of heaven. I've met God here." He had said to himself, I'm sure, let me build a monument. Let me build a cathedral. Let me put up at the very least a church. Well, he couldn't build a church. Well, let me put up a huge revival tent. Well, he couldn't put up a huge revival tent. He could barely put up his own tent. I'll put up my pillow. And then he found his pillow, which is a funny, hard little pillow. Of course, it's a stone. But out of the pillow came a pillar. Verse 18, and he set that up and he said, "This is my monument, the gate of heaven. This is where I met God. This is my landmark. This is the landmark of my life." And later on, people would say, "Oh yes, there's Jacob's stone there, the gate of heaven." We call it Bethel now, the house of God. God's house is there. Luz became Bethel, and Jacob then, verse 20, makes what I think may be the first actual vow ever recorded in the Bible, to the effect that if God is indeed with him, end of verse 21, then the Lord will be my God. And so Jacob, who had never mentioned God before, hardly at all, or if he did talk about God, he would always talk about him as the Lord your God, he'd say to his father, Isaac. Jacob, whose very name means he clutches or he trips up, he struggles, starts on the road of knowing God as it leads to the point of chapter 32, where he finds himself one night struggling with a divine wrestler in his determination not to be away from the God's hand of blessing. Genesis 32:28, God tells him that from now on he will no longer be called Jacob, he clutches, he trips up, but rather Israel, which means he wrestles with God. And Jacob's life was never without struggle, never. Of course, he learned things through those struggles. Was he astonished to learn the lesson from the vision of the staircase reaching to heaven? To hear the words of universal blessing that would run right through him to the entire world? That's what God said would happen. And in fact, God was saying to him, you didn't need to cheat Esau. Don't you realize that the birthright was yours anyway? You had it. And it says so as far back as the birth of the twins. We know this, don't we? Genesis 25:23, the one will be the stronger than the other will serve the older will serve the younger. Well, that was the time of their birth. The birthright was always him. He didn't have to be a struggler. One lesson that you and I could take to heart is this: just because life may be difficult for us at a certain moment doesn't mean that God isn't involved in our life. Now, you may not see the angels ascending and descending upon the staircase in the way Jacob did. Even so, heaven is only a half hair's breadth away from the earth. even more so now that we live in the era of Christ in the New Testament. Because you might recall how Jesus is recorded in the first chapter of John talking to Nathanael, and then he added, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." So the vision of Genesis 28 finds its completion in the incarnation, in the message of Advent and of Christmas that tell us that God has come close to us in our sorrows and in our trials. He has come to us in Jesus Christ, who is the ultimate perfect stairway to God's love, forgiveness, acceptance. We'll learn more about Jacob in the coming weeks, and you'll see that he has his share of pain, but God is there with him throughout his trials. And what of Esau? Esau had no pain at all. Esau seemed to have led a pretty trouble-free existence, but Esau missed out on the blessing that was Jacob's. Esau was a less complicated character than Jacob. And now, by any sensible standard, I probably wouldn't appoint Jacob to be our assistant pastor. He's far too complicated and angular and unreliable. But that's the story of God's workings. I want you for a patriarch, head of the family of faith, head of the 12 tribes of Israel. You, Jacob, the cheat, the liar, the clutching one, the grasper. That's the story of God's workings. He'll take the misfit, he'll take the ugly one, he'll take the one with a bit of a bad record, he'll take that awkward, angular character. You take that individual whom no one is particularly keen to see elected, and he'll say, "I'll elect you. I've chosen you just as I chose Jacob, the gate of heaven." So always a wonder, to us Christians, when we meet someone who has just come to faith in Jesus Christ. Every so often we meet them. There were some not too long ago, started with Jesus Christ for the first time in their lives. And when I meet them, I want to cry, because I think to myself, here's another example of what happened to me years ago, to happen to every Christian who comes to faith in Jesus Christ. God taking someone and saying, "I love you, and I've put my hand, I've tapped you on the shoulder for my kingdom, the gate of heaven." It's a wonderful thing to see. It's a great privilege. May we all sense that privilege even right now, as God says, "I have chosen you to be an inheritor of my kingdom, a member of my family." But it was never easy for Jacob. Why the next chapter brings him to a reintroduction with his uncle Laban, who is a complete shark, cheating Jacob out of his wages, cheating him out of his marriage, as Genesis 31 verse 7 says, cheating him and changing his wages 10 times. And Jacob is terribly shocked to be cheated like this. After all, he's been converted now. Appalling behavior from Uncle Laban. Well, you shouldn't do a thing like that to me. Remember, he's seen the angelic staircase. Well, of course, it's only what he'd done to Esau earlier on. Yes, there's Esau. Esau also has to be reckoned with one day, and the thought of Esau sends Jacob's blood pressure shooting up and gets him a bit paranoid, but he needn't have worried. The story finally tells us that he needn't have worried. But it was never easy for Jacob. All the time, it seems as though God is saying to him, relax a little. Stop the struggle. Do it my way. I'm going to bless you anyway. And even when it's difficult, Jacob knows in the end that he's been blessed. He struggles with that stranger in Genesis 32, of course. It's God he's struggling with during that night of encounter. And we'll see Jacob at the end of the encounter. His thigh is out of joint. He's limping. His shirt is torn. He's terribly disheveled. And yet God has blessed him. People look at him and they say, there's Jacob. He's just been blessed by God, this Jacob, now Israel, and he knows it. And just because it's a difficult moment in life, it doesn't mean that God is not involved. 5 minutes before the breakthrough comes, that unanswered prayer or the end to that difficulty that we may be facing in our lives, 5 minutes before the breakthrough, God is just as alive and just as active as he is 5 minutes after the breakthrough has taken place. Israel. He struggles with God. The very name was a commentary about this patriarchal figure from whom was to emerge the 12 tribes. And as I read through the story of Jacob, I'm amazed at the amount of pain that he did face and difficulty. And God was with him the entire time. God helped him to be patient in the end. God helped him. God enabled him. So if there are sometimes those among us who find ourselves caught in that period of affliction or difficulty, misunderstanding, the things not getting better or getting right, come back to the thought, I don't want to be like Esau, who had no problems. Much better to be Jacob. Now take as a tiny illustration of that, in 2015, I was with a group of pastors who were working with Holy Trinity Brompton, a sort of collection of evangelical Anglican churches right at the heart of the borough of London. And I asked one of the retired vicars if he'd ever met the Queen. And apparently that's a question all Americans ask. They say, do you know the Queen, or have you ever met the Queen? Well, I asked him, and he told me that in the early 1980s, when Margaret Thatcher was elected as Prime Minister, he took his two little boys to see Mrs. Thatcher going to Buckingham Palace to be asked to form a government. And he said to the two boys, come along, this is rather historic. A woman is going to be made Prime Minister, and then we'll have tea after that, because that's what they do, right? And they stood outside of Buckingham Palace, and sure enough, eventually the limo pulled up and out stepped the VIP, went into the palace. A few minutes later, the figure came out again, and everyone clapped and dispersed, got in their cars or got on the tube. And then he said to the boys, well, let's get going now. Come on, off we go. Tea time. And just then he heard a voice. Don't go. Don't go. So he looked around, see who had spoken. He couldn't see who it was. Thought he must have been imagining it. So he said again, okay, off we go again. And then he heard it again, don't go. So in mystification, he looked more carefully, and then he saw who the words were coming from. It was a policeman standing, looking straight ahead, saying out of the corner of his mouth, don't go. Well, he said, why shouldn't we go? Is there something else? Can't tell you, but don't go. Everyone else has gone. Everyone else, hundreds of people swarming off, except the Reverend and his two little boys have been waiting patiently outside the palace, and they only had to wait 5 minutes, and then out came the Queen in person. And they got a good deal that day, just for waiting as the man had told them to. And so sometimes when we're caught in the thick of life's troubles, and there may be someone in trouble at the moment, I don't know who you might be, believe that God is right there with you. He's there, and he's saying, hold on, don't throw in the towel. Do you want to see the great coming back of Jesus Christ in incandescent glory at the end of the world? Then don't go. Hold on. Someone's a bit fed up with life in the church. Oh, our small group is awful. I'm having a terrible time in our Bible study. Don't go. Hold on. Just as Mary did at the tomb that day when she was hovering around and thought, well, there's nothing to wait for, but I'm not going anywhere. God blessed her, met her in Jesus. And there's always more to learn if we're ready to learn, if the eyes of our spirit are open to see the nearness of heaven to us and to receive the grace of God. For Esau, life was a very simple affair. You lived, you slept, you woke up, you ate breakfast, you hunted, you ate, you slept, you died. Had Esau but known it, by the time he'd shot and eaten his first rabbit, he already reached his ceiling. There was nowhere further to go. And I think the vision of the staircase from earth to heaven helps us all as Christian believers to place that ceiling in our lives that much, very much higher. Would you pray with me? Oh, Lord, we find it difficult to understand why you loved Jacob and actually chose him to be your instrument for the world's good. We would never have chosen him. Your ways are past our understanding, but we thank you for going through the accounts of his life and of his struggles, and that he struggled with you and became known as such. Go on, Lord, blessing us through him and his example and the covenant which was reestablished through him that wonderful night in Bethel, the house of God. For your name's sake, amen.